In this video, you're gonna learn how to start the new. First step, let's go to the gas room. So we're in room 105. We're gonna turn on the news argon supply. You can check that up here. We have tons of placards for that. We have two hooked up, so we probably wanna pick the heaviest one so we don't waste our time. And that's this guy. And we're also sitting at about 340 PSI. You don't wanna be above 350 PSI. It's just gonna blow air all day long. It's gonna be loud, it's gonna be annoying. So if you need to change that pressure setting on this pressure valve right here, you can turn that back and forth depending on what pressure you want to increase or decrease. So first we're going to turn on the tank. We turn on the gas use here. And then our pressure builder, which is just in line with it behind here. Once those are both open, you want to purge this line. And that's this vent valve here, just a little bit. And then this is your line valve that's gonna send it on to the new. You'll turn that all the way open. You wanna make sure you're checking the regulator once you've turned everything on and that it's sitting at 150 PSI. That's the minimum pressure that we need for our argon to keep the plasma lit, and that's the argon. We're now in room 103. This is where our chillers, our nitrogen, and our helium are for the new. We're gonna turn all of those things on in here. This is your nitrogen tank. They're always orange. They're always on also, but you wanna check sometimes. Just kind of open up your tank valve, make sure it's all the way. You can close it back down a little bit. Now we're gonna open up this line valve here. We're gonna open this all the way open. Once you've opened the line valve, you wanna check to make sure this pressure is just above that pin. We just need it flowing, we don't need it high. So this is the pressure in the tank. That's what you have left. Always make sure you're watching this. We need at least 100 PSI for overnight. When you put it on, it should sit around 200 or 2000 to 250. Next, we're gonna move to our helium tank. This is what flows through, carries our sample. Again, the tank valve should be open, but always check that. It is. Now we're gonna move to our line valve and open that guy, and you're gonna throw it all the way open. And it looks like we need to change this soon. That probably has about 2 more hours left in it. You should have it sit up here when you put on a fresh tank. So this tank on the far left is also nitrogen. It's for our LOS valve, our line of sight valve, and it's always on. You just want to make sure it has some pressure in it and it's flowing through. Once you see it's getting low, you'll change the tank. But that doesn't happen more than every 6 months or so. This is our big plasma chiller. To turn it on, you'll press this giant button. You'll just push this giant button. This will kind of flash at you a little bit, and then over about 5 minutes, once the news is on, it'll go back to a normal number, which should read about 15. You're also gonna wanna check the water level in here. We put half DI, half milliQ water if you need to refill it. There's 2 little hinges. You'll squeeze tight, lift it up, unscrew the cap. Make sure your water is near the rim and that it's cycling through. If you notice that it's stagnating or low, you'll want to do a couple other checks, but just for turning on, it's good. Water level is great. You're good to go. And close. Now we're going to go check our small plasma chiller. This is always on. You never need to worry about this guy unless it's off. You want to check the water only. We've got a white cap right here. You'll just unscrew that, check in, look down inside. Yes, that awful color is normal. You just make sure there's water in there and then close it back up. This is our vacuum Reppin pump. All you're gonna be doing here is checking to make sure the oil level is sitting about in the middle. If you're dropping down to this min, it's time for an oil change. This concludes turning on everything in the gas room, your chillers and your gases. The last thing you want to check before you head on over to turn on the mass spec and the laser is that fan over there is on. That's your exhaust fan. Now we're going to turn on our laser. This is the actual on for the laser. You turn the key clockwise to on. There's even on rented on it. Once you give it a couple seconds, then you'll actually have to turn on the laser computer, which is behind us here. You'll just press that one time, you'll see it turn blue, that means it's on, and then if you look over to the right, you'll see your laser computer activate. So we're getting ready to start the new. Before we do that, we want to make sure the glassware and cones are where we want them to be. So to open up the hood and check that, we'll go to this release button. It's just a toggle, you'll go release. You'll hear that click. You'll open up this guy. And this is our torch box. We have our torch in here, and we have these nice cones where our signal is being filtered through. You want the distance between your little bonnet, this disc here, and that silver cone to be about 3 millimeters. You want it to be about 2 to 1 millimeters between this coil and that bonnet. And then you want at least 1 millimeter between that very inner part of the torch and the coil. So you're just gonna check all of that, kind of eyeball it a little bit. So this is our helium line. You want to make sure that it's in the furthest part of the torch box as you can get it before you close that so it doesn't get pinched. So now we're going to close the torch box, and then we'll put it in lock. And you just want to check that, make sure it's snug. Actually, it wasn't snug, so it's good that we checked it. Now we're going to turn on the power to the mass spec with the RF generator. We hide it behind here for safety. You'll move this guy aside. There's a toggle at the very bottom on the left side of this black panel. You'll turn it on. You'll hear a little rev up. And after that's quieted back down to a neutral state, you just want to put the safety cover back in place. Then you're ready to light the new. Now we're ready to actually turn on the new with the software. First, we're going to load in a tune file. I'll go to Setup, Constants, Tuning, Initialize. I'm going to pick Faraday today because that sounds fun. We'll open that guy up, and that just does some presets so I don't have to worry about them later once the new is on. One thing to note before you start lighting the new is this direct control window. Close valve 1 should always be green. Once those have loaded in, we'll go ahead and press this big green start button. You'll hear that click, and then we'll just give it a minute and we'll wait to see if our plasma ignites up here. You'll see this reflected light change a little bit, and then it'll settle back down to 0 once it's lit. So let's just wait. So a couple things might happen when you try to light it. It might not light. You may get an error that says the torch didn't close. If that happens, you'll go back, unlock the torch, close the torch down. Please turn off the RF generator before you do any of that. The plasma may not light because it just didn't light. What it does when that happens is this in-out position here, it will go all the way out to 9. That's okay, just press start again. If it doesn't light a second time, you may need to start changing these vacuum settings. You know, maybe down 2 clicks to start, then try pressing start again, see if it lights, maybe try 2 clicks down again. Further past that vac setting. And what you'll do is you'll just try several versions of a vac setting to see what ignites the plasma. And that's just trial and error, and no one can tell you the right one. And then once you've lit at that vac setting, your reflected light will likely be much higher. So once it's on and stabilized a little bit, you'll want to change that vac down so reflected is reading 0 again. The new likes to start at 8401 about, but you may need to go lower. What happens is it will go up to a point, so you may not be below a point enough to be reaching the pressure that you need. So you'll just change that back setting. I can go down 1 or 2. As you see, that affects my reflected light, so when you light it again, you'll want to change that. It'll be a little bit higher than usual. So I'm going to put it back. I'm going to back up 1 to bring my reflected light back at 0. It may not light because you have a chiller problem. So our chiller cools our torch, and it may just not be flowing. That's why we always check it in the beginning, make sure we're getting a good flow through there. Your argon could be out, which is a big one. Go check that tank, make sure it's on, make sure you have pressure. Those are the main ones. There it goes. Reflected light's going down. After this has been on for a little under a minute, these valves down here will open after 30 seconds to a minute after the new being lit. So this is your LOS valve, this is another valve, and those will both open, and then you're ready to go. Once your plasma is lit, digital control, you'll see a couple of tick marks here. Once it's lit, you'll see HT tick on. That means that all of our things are being sourced and active. After your plasma is lit, you're going to want to reference this reflected light reading. If it's above 4 and it's been on for a while, you're going to want to toggle this vacuum 1 or 2 clicks. No more, please. 1 click up, you'll see it kind of go up or down. It looks like it's stabilized there, so we're just going to leave it alone. That looks good. If it doesn't go down, you'll just try the other vacuum direction. You'll click once, You'll see it go up, then you'll want to bring it back, and it'll go back down to 0. You may need to do that several times, never clicking more than once in either direction over 10 seconds. If you're running any sort of uranium lead analyses, you're going to want to have your ion counters on to measure 204 at the minimum. To do that, you'll go to this IC supply window. There's a protection button. You'll turn that on. It'll turn green. That's great. And then you'll go to digital control and make sure IC ion counters is enabled. Then after the instrument's warmed up, which is approximately 30 minutes, you'll be ready to go with those. Once everything's on, you're gonna wanna reference valve control, make sure all of our pressures within our system are working properly. And all of those values are in the manual, so don't panic, it's page 4. And the most important one is this one here right after this LOS valve, and that should be reading 9 to the negative 9 millibar. The other turbos are negative 2. These inner ones are, negative 4 millibar to negative 7 millibar over here. All of this is in the manual. Just reference those. If you feel concerned, ask Mark. If there's no reading, you're in trouble. But just make sure you're checking the LOS valve pressure after that. This concludes turning on the new. Stay tuned for tuning the new.